A bronze machine was recovered from a Mediterranean shipwreck in 1901. It calculated eclipses, months, and lunar returns. The civilization that built it left no continuation in its craft. For more than a millennium afterward, no comparable geared astronomical mechanism appears in the surviving record. The artifact remained. The Lineage did not. A bronze machine was recovered from the sea. It calculated cycles, eclipses, months, athletic cycles, the returns of the moon. It was built before the death of the Roman Republic. Its body was made of precise gears, cut by hand from bronze, fitted inside a wooden case the size of a small box. The civilization that built it left no continuation in its craft. For more than a millennium after this device, no comparable geared astronomical mechanism appears in the surviving record. The artifact remained. The Lineage did not. This is a documented case file. Origin Protocol. Recurrence File 005. Entity Designation, Artifact, GRF005. Classification, Artifact. Sector, Global. Danger Level, Unresolved. 1 Mechanism. No continuation for more than a millennium. In the autumn of 1900, sponge divers working in the strait between the Peloponnese and Crete sheltered from a storm near the small island of Antikythera. While waiting for the weather to pass, one of them descended along a sloping seabed and reported a wreck below. Over the following months, divers recovered statues, ceramics, jewelry, and weathered fragments of corroded bronze. The bronze fragments did not look important. They were placed in storage at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. In May 1902, a member of the museum staff noticed something inside one of the fragments. Embedded in the corroded mass was the shape of a toothed wheel. Beside it, the trace of another. Beneath them, the impression of a precise inscription in ancient Greek. The shipwreck was dated by its other contents to the 1st century before the Common Era. The bronze object inside it was older than that. Bronze fragments. 1 year later, a gear was identified. The mechanism, when partially reassembled, fits inside a wooden case roughly the size of a small box. Its original outer form is reconstructed from corroded remains, but its surviving internal components are documented in detail. Inside the case were at least 30 interlocking bronze gears. Each gear had been cut by hand. The teeth were triangular, individually shaped, and aligned to drive one another through ratios that were not random. The largest gear carried more than 200 teeth. Smaller wheels nested inside larger ones, sharing axles, dividing rotation into fractions. On the surface of the device, dials and pointers were arranged to display the result of those rotations. Behind each dial, the inscription of a name. A month. A festival. A cycle. 82 fragments survived. 7 were large enough to study directly. The rest were corroded into compact masses, the shapes of their inner gears legible only after later imaging. The civilization that produced this object had no industrial method for repeating it. Each tooth was cut by a human hand. Hand-cut bronze teeth. The size of a small case. The mechanism did not simply measure time. It calculated it. By turning a handle on the side of the case, the user advanced every dial at once. Months passed across one face. Years across another. The position of the sun moved through the zodiac. The position of the moon moved with it, tracking its phase. On the back of the case, 2 large spiral dials traced longer rhythms. One spiral traced a 19-year cycle, after which the phases of the moon returned to the same calendar dates. The other traced an 18-year cycle, used to predict the recurrence of solar and lunar eclipses. A smaller dial marked the 4-year cycle of athletic festivals held in Greece, including the Games at Olympia. When the handle stopped, every output of the device pointed to a configuration of the sky. Where the surviving scales can be compared with modern astronomical reconstruction, the intended cycles become visible. Eclipses. Months. Athletic cycles. Returns of the moon. The Antikythera mechanism was built sometime between the 2nd and 1st centuries before the Common Era. The wreck that carried it sank shortly afterward. After it, the surviving record contains a gap. For more than 1,000 years, no comparable geared astronomical mechanism appears anywhere in the archaeological or textual record. There are water clocks. There are simple gear trains. There are calendar tables and observational records. There is no second machine that uses precisely cut bronze gears to compute eclipse cycles, calendar returns, and athletic festivals on a single dial face. The first geared astronomical clock comparable in complexity to the Antikythera mechanism appears in the surviving record in the 14th century. It is built in England, in a monastery, by a different culture, in a different language, using different metallurgy. Between the two devices, roughly 15 centuries pass. The intermediate centuries are not silent. They produce philosophy. They produce empires. They produce cathedrals, astronomical tables, observation logs, and entire libraries of computation. They do not produce another Antikythera. The device was built. It was not built again. Not in the workshop that produced it. Not in the city that received it. Not in the empire that absorbed both. After this device, no comparable geared astronomical mechanism appears for more than 1,000 years. The mechanism does not require a hidden civilization. It does not require a buried technology. It does not require a lost continent. It requires only what is already documented. Astronomers of the Hellenistic Greek period had recorded the long cycles of moon and eclipse. Greek mathematics had described the geometry needed to model the heavens. Greek craftsmen had access to bronze, to lathes, to the metallurgical knowledge required to cut precise teeth. The mechanism is, in this sense, a product of its time. What did not survive is the chain of craft around it. The mechanism is one surviving example of what may have been a small number of related devices. The workshops that produced it left no documented student lineage. The techniques used to cut its gears do not appear, in equivalent form, in the surviving engineering texts of the centuries that followed. The political collapse of the Hellenistic world disrupted continuity of practice. The result is documented, not mysterious. A specialized practice existed. The conditions to continue it did not. The mechanism is real. The continuation is missing. The Antikythera mechanism is, by itself, a single object. By itself, it is not a recurrence. But the shape of what surrounds it is. An object exists. It demonstrates a level of craft. The craft demonstrates a chain of practice. The chain of practice requires generations of teachers, students, workshops, repetition, refinement. That chain is what failed. The artifact survived. The chain around it did not. This is the pattern observed in the file. It is not the pattern of a single lost machine. It is the pattern of a single surviving object pointing back to a network of practice that left no second example. A thing was made. The making of it was not transmitted. The file does not need another object to make the pattern visible. One surviving artifact is enough. The artifact remains in the museum case. The hands that produced it do not. The instructions those hands followed do not. The artifact survived. The chain around it did not. The Antikythera mechanism remains in Athens, in the National Archaeological Museum, behind glass. Its surviving fragments are catalogued. Its inscriptions are transcribed. Its functions are reconstructed. Imaging of its corroded interior continues to refine the model of what it once did. The case is, in physical terms, closed. The device is documented. Its purpose is explained. Its mechanism is understood in outline and, increasingly, in detail. What is not closed is the absence around it. The artifact does not require an explanation. The absence does. A craft existed. A craft stopped. The artifact survived its makers, then survived the silence that followed them, then surfaced from the sea more than 19 centuries later, still indicating cycles, still pointing at the sky. It is filed. Not because the device is mysterious. Because the pattern is filed. The pattern is the file, cross-reference. Artifact RF005 represents the second artifact class file within Recurrence files, following RF003, Voynich manuscript. Where RF003 documented a single object that has resisted decipherment, RF005 documents a single object whose construction chain itself was not continued. The Antikythera mechanism is housed at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens and continues to be imaged and reconstructed by peer-reviewed studies. Its functions are understood in outline and increasingly in detail. The pattern is not the device. The pattern is the absence around it, the documented gap of more than a millennium in the surviving record of comparable geared astronomical mechanisms. The recurrence is the discontinuity of craft, observed across one of the most studied artifacts of the ancient world. End of file.